Alright. Warhammer 2 unit guides aren't so bad out there. You can go check them out. Only if you already have played the game, and are just beginners. But if you've never played kind of the Total War games or just any kind of Warhammer game in general, that's so freaking long! Oh, Empire Wars here. Yay! Well, we're gonna make a guide about Warhammer. So if I do miss a couple of units out there, you guys, don't blame me because there's a lot of freaking units out in freaking Warhammer 2, including when it comes to them combining Warhammer 1. So don't blame me. I'm gonna keep this brief and quick as possible. Alright, let's start with the Sword Infantry. The Sword Infantries are strong against Missile and Spear Infantries. They're really weak against Monsters Infantry, Monsters, Flying Missile Cavalry, and Charging Cavalry as well. So keep that in line of anything out in the open, but if they do have a chance to be able to attack in flanks, do so with percussion, I guess.
Sigma! Preserve us!
Next one we're going to talk about are the Spear Infantries. These guys are pretty strong against Cavalry, and also a little bit of Missile Cavalry if they do get into melee combat with you. Make sure you guys keep these guys in larger numbers depending on the quality of troops. If they're lower quality, make sure you bring in larger numbers, because if you bring a freaking army of stick rats to a freaking Tyrannosaurus fight, then you're probably going to be dead by now. Cavalry infantries are just like Spear infantries, but just a little bit more steroids basically. Instead of just them having just anti-large stats, just bonus stats against large units, they will also have armor piercing as well. So if you do need to contend with armored units, such as like armored infantries, or just armored like big units as well basically, then these guys are ready to go. So technically, Cavalry infantries with just a big ass spider monster units are basically like you're using just top 6 against a freaking tarantula. That's all you're using at this point. Greatsword infantries are just like sword infantries. They have less defense, but they have more on attack, and they do have armor piercing along with that. So basically, they are not only just anti-infantry, they're also anti-armored units basically. So they can go up against armored infantries, and they do pretty well with the flanks. So keep in mind with that. Do not keep it in frontline combat for a while, because they will get killed. Moving on to the next units of missiles would be the archer and the crossbow units. These guys are long range units. They can pepper down any units at long range. Keep them at long range. Keep them guarded, because if they go to melee combat, they will not be alive, I guess. That's what you gotta say. The exceptions would be elf units, because elf units do really have good melee / archer units, so you could probably use them. But when it comes to missiles with humans, do not use them at close range. Not at all. Never in any case you should use them at close range. The next set of missile infantries will be the musket infantries. These guys don't have a lot of attack damage when it comes to missile damage, but they make up with that with armor piercing damage, which they're pretty strong against armored infantry, missile infantry, and even monstrous infantry, and also monsters as well. If they're very armored, these guys can pierce through that armor, no biggies. Keep that in long range though, because their long range combat is superb range combat, but their melee combat, when it comes to melee attack and defense, are very low. So keep these guys at long range, or keep them company with some cavalry or with some infantry for them to be able to get pot shots at this infantry. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the melee cavalry. So there are a couple of different types of cavalry, not just melee and shock cavalry, but just regular cavalry. They're just only good against missile infantry and only in the flanks basically. You could probably be able to charge these guys against melee infantry, but they will not do so well. They're very weak against spear and halberdier infantry. They're pretty weak against basically like all kinds of monsters and monsters as well basically. So keep that in mind. Do not charge these guys if need to do so in order to cover your troops for a retreat basically, but basically these guys are only meant for speed and only meant for scouting kind of positions basically. They're really fast, but they're not really good with anything else. But when it comes to shock cavalry, these guys can do anything that the melee cavalry cannot do. Basically, they're able to be good at the charges, good against melee cavalry, melee greatsword infantry, flanks, and even the rear basically. Even missile infantry, I think I forgot about that part. But these guys are really exceptional when it comes to charges. Keep them in the rears and the flanks though, because of the fact if you keep them in the charge in the front, they could do damage in the front, but they're very effective when it comes to flanks. Keep that in mind that these guys are not really good against monstrous infantry and also monsters as well. So make sure you guys use only cavalry for the brink of surprise or just for scouting, and just any type of form of like cavalry. general. Except for this cavalry though. There are two types of monstrous cavalry that you can use. One you can use anti-infantry, and the other you can use as anti-large. Anti-infantries do have shields, so you can be able to use this on the charge, and to be able to have prolonged combat against infantry. When it comes to halberdier kind of monstrous cavalry, you can use them against monstrous infantry, cavalry, and monsters as well. Keep them in reserve though, because these guys are pretty nimble, they're fast, they're pretty high damaging and high on defense, depending on which units you're going against basically. So keep that in mind. These guys are elites and they're very expensive, so make sure you guys use them probably in the last minute, or just use them by surprise as well. Just any form of like monstrous cavalry, just use them by surprise. Missile cavalries aren't as strong as the ones in Rome 2 Total War, but they do get the job done. They're strong against missile infantries, any form of slower infantries that don't have any like missiles on them. Basically they will do the job pretty well when it comes to hit and run tactics. Their only weaknesses will probably be melee combat still, like as usual in Rome 2 Total War as always. And when it comes to monstrous infantry, just anything in combat, when it comes to missile cavalries, they will not be able to beat, except when it comes to like sheer numbers or the quality of the units that they're trying to attack. War Chariots in Warhammer 2 are making a comeback because they're not pretty OP, just pretty well done, to be honest. Because of the fact, whenever it comes to these units, as much as they are good on the charge against missiles, melee, and a little bit of halberdier infantries, they're not really good when it comes to prolonged combat. As much as they do have those kind of melee units on top of the chariots, they don't really last long. So keep them on the charge, keep them on the move, like a freaking grass mower basically. So you cannot let them stop. If they stop, they're gonna be dead on the spot. Missile chariots are a little bit faster and a little more mobile than melee chariots. These guys are only used for scouting. You can probably be used on the rear charges and for missile infantry, but never on the frontline charges because they'll be attacked. They'll probably get screwed up by spear infantry and by halberdier infantries, and just the rest of any kind of infantries if you do make them stop. Like I said before, keep on with the chariots just to keep them moving like a lawnmower. Just keep them moving, don't stop. Moving on to the artillery units. They do have different types of artillery, which such as like anti-infantry units, armor piercing / anti-large units specifically basically, but they all have one purpose, is to basically deal heavy firepower at such a humongous range basically. And with this kind of range, they do have lack of melee defense and melee attack, so keep that in mind. Keep these guys guarded at all times because they will be the victory or the death. But much to my surprise, war machines are actually kind of your mobile kind of tanks / kind of like artillery units. These guys are formidable at melee combat, and they do have cannons on their side, so they can still shoot, but they're pretty weak when it comes to firepower, so don't keep them at long range for a while basically, because these guys are meant to be in the front lines. They're kind of like your guards units, but they do have freaking guns, so keep that in mind with differences between artillery and war machine units. War beasts, in my opinion, are the fastest in the game basically. These guys are pretty good whenever it comes to, like I said, scouting with cavalry, but these guys are pretty good when it comes to harassing units and trying to stop them from advancing for the majority of the time. There are kind of like varieties of other units as well with war beasts, but to my opinion, to my experience, majority of the time when it comes to war beasts, they are very weak against anything except for missiles. So watch out for that compared to this unit we're going to be talking about next. Monstrous beasts are basically when you take war beasts and you give them steroids, and this is what you get basically. War beasts are a little bit slower, but they are kind of maneuverable just like cavalry. Their charge bonus is pretty good, and they're pretty strong against any form of melee infantry except for armored melee infantry, except if they do have the exception armor piercing basically. So keep in mind with that, basically these guys are a little bit far better than war beasts. They are meant to harass units as well basically, but they are kind of used as basically like chargers, so they can disrupt the charge and to be able to be sacrifices, so that your other better infantry or your better units can just come in and just wreak havoc. Cold One cavalries come in two forms, either unmounted cold ones or just mounted ones. The difference between unmounted ones do have a ability called, I believe it's like rage or something. They go berserk through prolonged combat, so you can't really command them. unlike mountain ones. Basically, you can be able to keep on commanding them without any to deal with the freaking rampage or rage. So basically, these guys are pretty good against missile infantry. They're good against armored units, but be careful not to keep them from combat for a while. These guys are only good for charges and for like out of combat. So fight, flee, basically. That's what you gotta do with these guys for the majority of the time. They have pretty good damage, pretty good bonus damages against armored units, so keep that in mind. If you do need units to take out larger units than of infantries, then you could probably go with the Cold 1 Spirit Cavalry. Basically, these guys are pretty good against cavalry, monstrous infantry, and monstrous beasts as well. They're pretty weak against halberdiers and spear infantries, basically. So keep that in mind, and you'll do fine with these guys. Monstrous infantry, just like any other like units, they can come in many forms, such as like against infantries, they're pretty good at them, or against larger units such as cavalry, their own monstrous infantry and monsters as well. Actually, basically, these guys are really good on the charge. If you do want to disrupt any unit lines, basically these guys are the way to go for it, to be honest. Make sure you got some backup behind you, because these guys are not really good by themselves, but they can hold themselves out for as long as possible, depending if they're good on attacks or on defense, basically. Next units we'll be talking about today will be the Flying Melee Infantries. These guys are pretty good against missile units, and basically that's that, because they're pretty weak at missile units at long range when you can be able to shoot them. And also they're not really good at melee combat, so there's pretty much no use of using these units unless you want scouting and for speed, for information basically on the field. Instead of getting some flying melee units, try to get some flying missile infantries. Basically, these guys are pretty good against any melee infantries, because melee infantries cannot attack by air except for missile infantries, but you can use these guys in order to just swoop down and just to go in melee combat against missile infantries, since missile infantries are pretty bad on the defense and the attack. But beware of missile infantries when it comes to range, so make sure you cover the distance with those guys first, and never go into combat with melee infantries, because you're dead. Now we're heading off to the Apex Predators. We got the monsters here. These guys have a high attack, high defense, depending on what monster you're using, and they got a high amount of HP. That's what they all have in common, basically. These guys are strong against any form of monstrous infantry, any form of melee infantry, and just anything in general that's within the melee combat. Probably exceptions for large amounts of spear infantry and halberdier infantries. Missile infantries, because they are pretty slow for their make of large HP, basically, and they are pretty weak against any kind of anti-large units, basically. So beware of that. These guys are your precious stones, so make sure you don't lose them in the field. Artillery and missile monsters are pretty superb when it comes to range, and also in melee combat as well. They're able to defend themselves from any form of sword infantry, cavalry, and shock cavalry as well. They can also do toe-to-toe with war machines too, basically. Their weaknesses are monsters, anti-large units, monstrous infantry as well, I believe, and any form of anti-large infantry. I think I already said that, with halberdiers and spears, basically. So if you want to keep these guys in the field for victory, then keep these guys out of sight, or just basically behind the lines, so you can defend yourselves, and then you should be well on the course. Second last but not least, basically, we have the flying monsters. These guys are little war machines of the sky. They can take down war machines, monstrous infantry, any form cavalry, missile infantry, flying units as well, and just any kind of form of infantry that they take down, basically. These guys can just melee themselves to the ground, and they can just retreat up in the air while not taking any damage from melee units. But they're pretty weak against missile units if you do get like a large number of them, so be careful of that. These guys are literally your jewels, your platinum YouTube button. That's literally why I just call these guys, because be careful with these units, because these guys are your precious ones. So make sure you keep them in the front lines. Make sure you use them against monstrous infantry or any other monsters that are on the ground. There are many different types of heroes and lords in this game. Heroes are just kind of like juveniles of lords, as I say majority of the time, but their strengths depend on the abilities of what hero or lord has, basically. Some can have, wizards, spellcasters, basically, that can just friggin' like crowd control. Melee specialists to take on only one individual enemies. You got missile specialists that just freaking shoot the crap out of the enemy in the back. And also you got someone that can also give your troops some morale. The weaknesses are just large number of troops against your own lords or heroes, so be careful with that. And that's all the units, you guys, for Warhammer 2 Total War. If I did miss any of the units in here, I'm sorry. There's just way too many like details of units. I just try to make it like as general as possible for you guys. If you guys do have a complaint about this or just any other suggestions, make sure you guys go down to the comments below and just comment down below what other units I have forgotten and what kind of only unit challenge should I do for this game, because I've already done it for a little bit for Rome 2 Total War and a lot for Empire War. I'm gonna be doing another challenge for that for next week. But I want to say as well, thank you so much for the 100 subscribers, you guys. It's a long way trip basically, and I can't wait until the next journey begins. And if you guys do want to check me out online as well, live on twitch.tv/jkstrategist, and you guys can. I am gonna be turning down my stream schedule on my days when I can stream. So now I am going to be streaming from Fridays to Saturdays from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. basically. So if you guys do want to check me out, play some Animal Crossing, or just hang out with some Mario Kart, you guys, then you're all welcome to do so, you guys. Please check out my Twitch channel, and you won't regret it, you guys. Alright. Anyway, so thank you for so much for all the love and support once more, you guys. I will be continuing to do some more of these RTS games, and I'll be doing a collaboration video. You guys will be seeing that from Banthus, so check him out as well. He does a lot of Star Wars theories, so if you like Star Wars theories, go check him out. Alright guys, I'll be out today, and without further ado, for the Republic, you guys have a good day.